The UK has announced a £120 million aid package for Sudan at a conference in London to mark the 2-year anniversary of the conflict in the African country. Now, you may remember before Christmas, we spent a whole hour talking about the civil war in Sudan. A huge number of people got in touch afterwards to say what a great hour it had been, and they learned so much. And I must admit I did too, because I wasn't wholly familiar with the causes of that civil war. Let's talk to Karl Schembri, who is Regional Media Advisor for East and Southern Africa at the Norwegian Refugee Council, who visited Sudan at the end of March. Karl, very good evening to you. What was the point of this conference?
Well, the stated point of it was to put the attention back on Sudan, bring some kind of influence, some kind of diplomatic power to break through the stalemate of these last 2 years, which have seen a massive deterioration of the lives of millions of Sudanese and non-Sudanese who are living in the country, who have had to flee. This is the largest displacement crisis on earth right now, with over 15 million people forced to flee from their homes, 3 million of them having to flee to neighboring countries, and some of them in even worse conditions, in Chad and South Sudan, extreme poverty and underdevelopment. So there was the stated aim of putting some political influence, bringing the conflicting parties to the table, and raising the aid funding, which is one of the outcomes, thankfully, and we're extremely grateful for that, to see that is one of the outcomes. Unfortunately, not much more seems to have to be happening on the political front, where which would lead to some kind of resolution, or at least sparing civilians. I've just come back from Darfur. This is the crime scene of mass ethnic cleansing of thousands of people who have been executed, women who have been gang raped, mass looting of villages, burnt to the ground, and forcing people to flee for their lives. That's just one side. There is famine raging, raising its head across the country. In at least 5 areas of the country, famine has been declared. Other areas are unreachable. We can't even reach there with aid, let alone to check the conditions of the people, because they are under siege. So you have 2 warring parties who have gotten away with murder, literally, and are still getting away with it, stopping aid, putting civilians, children, women, disabled people at risk for their lives, and we see no political movement forward to stop this. Nobody is exercising their influence to stop this.
But without there being a ceasefire, without the 2 sides actually agreeing to allow aid to come in freely, what is the point of a country like the UK promising £120 million of food aid when nobody can be confident that it would actually get there?
Well, aid is getting in areas where we are allowed to reach. And our point is, if the 2 warring parties want to keep shooting at each other, that is their business. They just can't put the civilians in peril. So if they want to continue with their war, with their violence, as long as they protect civilians, they do not attack hospitals, they do not attack schools, they do not attack aid workers, as we've seen just last weekend in Zamzam camp, where 9 aid workers were killed and many others were hunted down and executed. The ceasefire, if you like, or even peace, is not a prerequisite for aid to go in. We can have ways of getting aid in, as long as aid workers and civilians are spared from this insanity.
So the UK has given £120 million. How much in total was raised at this summit from the UK and other countries put together?
Well, we're still getting the figures. There were other similar amounts from France and from other European nations. Other countries haven't yet declared or pledged their aid. But we need to put this into perspective. This comes at a moment where aid was massively already cut following the US funding cuts and putting on hold much of the aid. The US was the most generous donor towards Sudan and to the rest of the world, and has put millions of its aid funding on hold. So, of course, we need more funding and we need more of it, but this is just trying to offset a big gap
Okay.
left already.
Okay, Karl, thank you very much indeed. That's Karl Schembri from the Norwegian Refugee Council. Dallia Abdelmoniem is a Sudanese political analyst and commentator who had to leave her home in Khartoum when the fighting began 2 years ago, and she joins us from Cairo. Dallia, thank you very much for talking to us. What's your assessment of the current state of play? Is there any prospect of a ceasefire and the two sides actually talking to each other?
The chances for a ceasefire is basically the backers of both armies need to be brought to the forefront and need to be told bring an end to this. And when I talk about the backers, I'm talking about regional countries that are supporting either the Sudanese armed forces or the rapid support forces. And until that happens, and until there's actually sanctioning of those who are continuously breaking the arms embargo, allowing for so much arms and weapons to flow into Sudan from the western side via Chad, then any talks are useless. And there has to be an incentive. There has to be an incentive for these backers to ensure that there isn't actually an end to this war. We get a lot of statements and we get a lot of talk, but no real action is being taken to bring an end to this war. It's been going on for 2 years today.
How many people have lost their lives?
The estimates are 150,000, but because of the broken down infrastructure, as in people cannot report those who have been killed or died, no one has been buried properly, the number is believed to be more. I mean, just in the past few days alone in Zamzam, in Al Fashir, for example, in Zamzam camp, 400 people were killed, estimated to be much higher than that. So I can give you a number, but I think it doesn't mean that much because we really don't have the actual facts and figures at hand, because it's so hard to document.
And are you confident that the aid that not just the UK but other countries are providing to, that will actually get through to the people that need it most?
It will get through if it's given to the mutual aid groups. These groups are decentralized, they're unbureaucratic, and they're more streamlined than the vast majority of other aid organizations who are actually impeded by bureaucratic obstacles put in place by both warring sides, be it visa permits, or visas issued, or permits or given for them to travel. So these mutual aid groups, which are made up of Sudanese volunteers on the ground, you're talking about youth, you're talking doctors, teachers, they are the ones who've actually been feeding and holding up all these community kitchens and these safe zones and these medical centers for women who've been raped, gang raped in Sudan, who've gone through childbirth, and they give them hope. They provide them with food, with aid and shelter. So if the money goes directly to these mutual aid groups, then the money will go a long way, albeit it is a small amount. It's a drop in the ocean to what is needed. According to the UN, 6 billion is needed for Sudan. But it's a start, especially in light of the fact that the USA, which was one of the largest donors, has frozen its funding for Sudan. This will go some way. It's not a huge amount, but it's better than nothing. But end of the day, it's who they give this money to that will make the difference.